Hello and welcome to another episode of LGOtv Big Talk. And why Big Talk? Because I hate small talk. It is really just the bane of my existence. And I figured when I was starting this podcast, what I didn't want to do was have another conversation with a whole bunch of people who tell you the same stuff they tell you everywhere else. And so I wanted to bring on people who are super interesting, who have interesting stories, who have interesting ideas, who've had interesting lives, and actually ask them interesting questions. And my guest today is absolutely one of those interesting people. Heather Monahan was named one of the most influential women in radio and then was unexpectedly fired from her chief revenue officer job late in 2017. But she took that opportunity to write and self publish her very first book called Confidence Creator. And Confidence Creator, that's a pretty bold title. But it's not just that the title and it's bold. She actually trumped Donald Trump for the #1 spot for the business biography list on Amazon when her book came out. So, you got to bring it when you have a title like that. And she absolutely did. Then she launched her speaking career with her first TEDx talk. And that talk got promoted to Big TED, TED.com. It's been translated to 6 different languages. And it talks all about that moment when she got fired and how she figured out who she really was right there at that time. She's now launched her podcast called Creating Confidence, which is now number 17 on the entrepreneur list on Apple Podcasts. And she's a single mom. So, none of this has been easy. She's taught herself how to see fear as a green light, and a green light that means go, 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 and is committed to sharing her learnings with others as she continues to step into her fear. So, Heather Monahan, welcome to LGOtv Big Talk.
Thanks for having me.
I want to just go straight to the question that I'm sure that people ask you all the time, but that I get asked too. People are like, Laura, you're so fierce. It's so amazing how you get on stage. You're so confident. And the truth is, I'm not, but I look to other people like I am. So let's talk a little bit about where confidence comes from and a little bit about the illusion of it and how you find it within yourself. Where did your confidence come from?
My confidence came from losing all of my confidence, right? So for a long time, I had attached confidence with my paycheck, with my title, with my team, with these external factors. And I thought that was, a pretty real sense of confidence until I lost it all. When I lost my job, I thought I lost everything. And so in that moment, it really took me to ground zero to say, where am I? I'm starting at this zero baseline. I have no confidence. I don't believe in myself. I don't know what I'm going to do. I feel terrible. I'm scared. And slowly I started building confidence in an intrinsic fashion, which I had never really had prior to. And I look back on those times, real confidence comes from within and from this certainty within that has nothing to do with the external around you. And it's a really massive shift from the way that I used to see it.
But when you have all these people, I mean, like I wrote a book on this, right? Like you have all these people who are defining what success should be for you. It's the right car, it's the right house, it's the right spouse, it's the right clothes and exactly the right size, it's the right paycheck. It's all of those markers that we have as we're growing up that we attach this value to. You attach value to your paycheck. How do you figure out inside yourself to say, well, no, that's not for me, and I'm actually going to buck the system. I'm going to attach success to something else. And how do you find the way to say that's actually going to be right, that's going to be good, and it doesn't matter what everyone else thinks? I mean, confidence isn't I'm confident because I'm doing the same as everyone else. Confidence is I'm going to do my thing and feel really good about it anyway.
So for me, it was losing all of those things. When I got fired, that was kind of removed from my life. So I didn't have the luxury of attaching to it anymore. It was just gone, right? So when everything's gone, you have to reevaluate. And that time and those steps that I went through when I was fired and I was at ground zero with my confidence, that is what taught me what confidence really was. Those people that tell you, oh, confidence is this paycheck and that look and this person and this spouse, those people don't have confidence. And so for you to get real about it, you have to acknowledge that within yourself first. And for me, it was easy because those things were removed. It wasn't like I had the choice, right? For a long time, I had the choice to say, oh, this outfit means I'm competent. And if I get this promotion, it means I'm competent. So I sometimes you don't do the hard work until you're forced to do it. And that was 100% the case for me. I wasn't forced to go out and figure out, why am I not acting on this idea that I have? Why, if I don't feel good around this person, why am I not removing them from my life and moving on? Well, because I didn't want to not be politically correct, or I didn't want to be perceived a certain way. That's lack of confidence, lack of acting on your own intuition.
But you didn't choose to go back and try to recreate everything that was taken away from you. Like, you didn't go for another C-suite job. You didn't try to do the same thing. Which is what I think most people do. Most people are like, okay, everything's been taken from me, but that's success, so I should go back for it again. I should work for that same thing again. But you chose to go a different path, and it takes a leap of faith to know, I think, that what's going to be on the other side of the work for that other path is actually going to make you happy, because it's not something you had before. It wasn't something you were ever told was something you wanted to go for. So this I'm interested in this idea that you don't know what's in front of you until you take the first step and the second step and the third step. And maybe the confidence came from, I don't have a choice. I have to go, and finding your footing as you went towards it, right? The confidence came from competence, but you chose to not even rebuild what was the thing that you had before. So in that moment, how do you make that choice between where you go? You're at ground zero, you've lost everything. I think a lot of people right now in the age of coronavirus are like, my life isn't what I expected it to be. There's bravery that comes in going towards something that you don't know what it's going to look like, or even if it's going to fulfill you when you get there.
Yeah, in full transparency, when I accepted the position as chief revenue officer, I had to sign a 12-month non-compete, non-solicit, and it was for the entire industry. So essentially what that means is when they terminated me, I could not go anywhere in media, broadcast, radio, television, Netflix. I couldn't go to any space that I knew and was an expert in and had 25 years experience in. I could not get a job in that industry. With that being said, I took a step back and said, okay, if I'm going to go to work for someone else right now, I have to start over as a rookie, because I have to go to aviation or some industry I have no experience in. I won't be perceived as an expert, right? I'll be starting over at ground zero. And I didn't know instantly. Definitely the first 30 days, I was just lost. And I just kept taking action, whether it be asking for help online or letting people know I've been fired, or doing some different things, but I didn't know what I was going to do yet. In that window of time, I was constantly evaluating, okay, if I go and I'm, to the hotel industry and start over as a rookie, do I have to be a general manager first in order to get up the corporate ladder back to the level I was? If I go to this industry, and I just kept saying to myself, no matter what industry I have the opportunity to go to right now, I have to start over as a rookie. And finally, one day, I remember it was after I got off the Elvis Duran show. I said, if I'm going to start over as a rookie, I'm going to start over as a rookie working for myself. If I'm going to roll the dice on someone, I'm going to roll the dice on me.
Yeah, that is something that I didn't figure out for myself until I was deep into my 40s. It's like, if I'm looking around and I'm going to put all this time and effort, why aren't I betting on myself? And I'd been an entrepreneur for decades before that, where I'd started my own businesses, but just I still kept thinking that somebody else had better answers, somebody else knew more, somebody else is going to be able
Mhm.
to do this better. And it wasn't until I thought, everybody else, like, they're all just making it up as they go along too. I think that's like a huge part of confidence, is realizing that, like, none of us know what we're doing. We're just Some of us are better at faking that than others, or maybe some of us feel less secure, so we're looking at other people and assigning more security to them because we don't have it in and of ourselves.
Yeah, one of the things, this all happened to me when I was 43. So I'm right there with you, right? Prior to this, I was in a space where I was surrounded with people that I used to bang my head against a wall because I would be so frustrated. I'd come to board meetings and executive meetings with great ideas to innovate the business. And no, that's too risky. No, let's not do that. No. And I would constantly go home saying, this is insane. Why aren't people acting on my great ideas? So the funny part is, fast forward to 43, getting fired and finally saying, If I'm going to roll the dice on someone, I'm rolling it on me. There was this moment of, okay, well, now my next great idea, I actually get to do it and no one's going to stop me. And that was super, super exciting. My first great idea was my first book. That was the first product that I said, okay, I need something to sell, right? So I'm going to write a book and self-publish it. And it was super exciting because I'm like, this is a great idea. But then it was super scary because I don't know if I could be an author. I was supposed to be in corporate America. That was the lane I felt approved for, or that other people had told me I was approved for. No one had ever told me I was approved for this author lane. So I Googled, like, can you be an author? Like, what are the, I don't, I have no idea. And so ultimately I find out anyone who wants to write a book can be an author. And it was really up to me saying, I'm going to blow up all of these lanes and just be me wherever I go. And during this time of figuring this all out, that, yeah, I'm qualified to be whatever I want to be, truly, as long as I just am willing to have, the guts to go out there and try it. And going through this whole time, I realized successful people don't know the how, but they're willing to take the chance and move forward so that they can figure it out. And that, my book is such a great example of that. I just had to keep Googling, like, okay, well, how many words is a book? Like, and if you're in nonfiction, what does that exactly mean? And I didn't know how to write a book. I didn't know how to self-publish a book. I didn't know how to sell a book, but I just kept figuring it out along the way. And I made tons of mistakes. I wasn't an expert, and that was hard because I was coming from this very well-lit corridor called corporate America, where I knew my next move after CRO is CEO, and then you need to pick your board. I knew that landscape in and out. It was so well lit to me. However, I was now operating this really dark space where nothing was well lit, and I was having to no one handed me a blueprint and said, here's how you write a book, Heather, and here's how you self-publish, and then the next thing you should do is this. I didn't even know people got paid. I didn't know the speaker business was a thing. I had spoken for 20 years in corporate America. It was always assumed you do that as part of your role. You are never to ask for compensation. And I gave keynotes all around the country back then. But you never, they would have laughed at us in my old industry. Everyone had to do that as part of your executive commitment to the company and the industry. So I'll never forget, I had Googled, how do you sell books? And it said, speak. And I said, oh, easy, been speaking forever. So I started cold calling every company that I had, any kind of relationship with, and saying, hey, I'd love to come in and speak to you about innovation in the workplace. And I was going to speak for free everywhere. I just wanted to sell my books. And then one day I called someone and they said, what's your speaker fee? And I said, hang on a second. And I Googled speaker fee. And then it said from $5,000 to $500,000 for a keynote. And I said, I got to call you back. And then I started Googling speaker agents and speaker agencies. And, and it really opened my mind to how little I know, because I had been living in one little bubble called media. I never went out of it. I never went and checked out the hotel business, the aviation business, the speaking business. I didn't know about these other segments and opportunities. And that accelerated me to, if I didn't know about this, what else is there that I don't know about?
Oh, it's so true. When I started my last business, executive search business, I was literally sitting at my kitchen table with my infant in arms, and I got a phone call from somebody that I worked with back in my White House days, and she was like, "Hey, I heard." She was like, "Ew, I heard you had a baby. Cool, I guess." Right. This is one of those, like, definitely was not interested in having children, and she said, so anyway, our executive director just left. We need a new one, CEO search. Do you still do search? And I had just been doing search for the last 5 years, and I'd sort of left in this moment of rage where I was like, I can do things better and smarter and faster and more authentically, and I don't know how, but I can't work for these people anymore. And then I said, "Sure, yes." And she's like, "Great, what are you gonna charge me?" And I literally was like, I opened up my laptop and I Googled, "How do you write an executive
Mhm.
services contract?" Like, I had no idea what I was doing, and I think you're right, like, most entrepreneurs don't know how. They just know, like, the way they want the world to be. They have a sense of it, and they know that they need to get their message or their product or their something out there into the world. And the idea that, people are born fully formed as who they are, I think is it's nonsensical. But I think it stops a lot of us from doing that thing, because we look at somebody on stage and we say, "Oh, well, they clearly know what they're doing." I mean, today's the 4th anniversary of the first pay talk I ever gave, which I gave in Idaho for $1,500 and a hat with a potato on it. Like, no lie, because that's what they offered me. I had no idea. So there you are, you are realizing that there's this entire world that's out there in front of you and there's possibility and you're starting to get traction from the book. That's a magical moment where you're like, this is amazing. It's exciting. People want me to speak. They want me to come out. They want me to talk. It's wonderful. And also, you're realizing just how little you know and just how big the world can be out there and just how big potential is right now. That's a scary moment. It's a moment that I call wonder hell. It's amazing, exciting. It's wonderful that people want to spend any time thinking about your book and your message. It's also hell because you feel this burden of potential on you that you can do so much. What did that feel like in that moment? Where were you in that moment? And what were you hoping would happen once you realized that there was actually some legs here?
I mean, I didn't know what to do, right? It was sort of, I got steered into the book because Elvis Duran was so convinced I had a book coming. So I just felt like I took on his confidence that he had in me and I accepted that and moved forward. Then I was just
Mm.
trying to figure out how to sell books, which is what led me to speaking. And then once got led to speaking, it was like, okay, you need to do a TED talk. Like you need an agent. You need to be that. So I checked all the boxes. You need a speaker kit. So I started like filling out what are the things I need to do to excel in this business and started figuring those things out. And then I thought I need more products to sell. And I thought, what else can I sell? And I thought I should do, people ask me about my skincare. And so I thought I'm going to launch a skincare line. And I went all in on a skincare line. And while I was doing that, I partnered with Perry Ellis International to launch a clothing line. And then I thought, okay, I've got the book selling. I'm going to have speeches going. I'm going to have clothing line. I need more things that I can sell while I'm sleeping to really generate revenue and accelerate revenue. And I started building out a business plan. And I had so many things going and so many of them failed, right? And the clothing line was a year in and we got told no when we went to HSN because the clothing was dated and the company moved too slow to pivot. Anyhow, my partner on the skincare line had a new product launch coming out and they wanted to put things on hold for 6 months, which when you're a new entrepreneur and you need revenue, 6 months is a lifetime. And I could not, go to sleep for 6 months. So I walked away from that partnership, so my point is that time was very hard and it still is very hard now, especially with coronavirus in that it's very similar to that time right now because I'm having to completely reinvent everything that I do and say, okay, this worked in the past. It doesn't work any longer. How else can I drive revenue? What new product or service can I create? And it's just now I'm realizing whether you like it or not, and I certainly am not a fan, but this evolution of, okay, I'm a rookie entrepreneur. Okay, well now I'm a couple years in, I'm starting to figure out, oh, coronavirus hits. Now I'm a rookie virtual entrepreneur. I'm a rookie virtual speaker, right? It's like you're constantly starting over and having to say, this is worth trying, this is not worth trying, and hoping you make the right bet. And sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't.
Yeah, I think that we assign a lot of self-identity to failure. The skincare line didn't work out, the clothing line didn't work out. For a lot of people, they might just say, well, I guess I'm not an entrepreneur and go back and get, a traditional job in a traditional office. And I think the sign for me of a true entrepreneur is somebody who sees failure as fulcrum and not finale. And the fact that from each of these, you learn lessons along the way. Like you learn lessons about the speed at which you need to bring product to market, about the kinds of audiences that you're looking for, which messages resonate, which ones don't. From doing the TED talk, you went to the TED talk to talk about how do you build confidence, but it was a talk about this moment where you realize that you had a villain who was getting in your way, and now your next message is about how to leapfrog villains, because you got a response from that where you realize that that message had a lot of traction, that people were interested in learning more about that. Because I think all of us have people in our lives who, you can call them frenemies, if you want to be nice. I am I have a whole dirty dozen, of people who are like who block you and who keep score and who, are sort of smiles in the front and knives in the back. Tell us a little bit about that moment of realizing that you had a villain who was getting in your way.
Yeah, so this is going back to when I was in corporate America. I had worked at the same company for 14 years. I had been promoted 3 different times, I'd done a phenomenal job working there. And there was a CEO who ultimately was running the company. He had a daughter who was a CFO and a son who was the president. And I was on the operations side, not on the finance side, and worked very closely with his son and with him. And things were always great with all of us. So when you're on the revenue side, you're not really, with the finance people all the time. You're sort of opposing sides. In most companies, there's the people generating the revenue and then the people cutting expenses. So clearly she and I were never close, but it didn't really affect me much. And she was, crunching her numbers and I was out generating revenue. So we didn't spend a lot of time together. Well, as time passed and as I elevated in the company, as she elevated in the company, I decided, this is now 5 years ago, I decided I wanted more than just to make rich people richer. I wanted to bring more good to light for people who grew up poor like I had, and show them if I can get to the C-suite when everyone says women can't get to the C-suite, then you can too. So I launched a personal brand 1 year before I got fired. The CFO called me immediately. The GC called me immediately, threatening me. And they both said, take it down, turn all of your social handles back to private, get rid of your website. This is a conflict of interest for the company. Well, I had done my due diligence. Bank of America's chief revenue officer had a huge personal brand, like companies that were so much bigger than the company I represented. And I had spoken to attorneys. I knew that you can have your own life online outside of work. And I said, I'll put the verbiage up there. I'll do whatever you eat, but I'm not getting rid of it. And I really, put a stake in the ground that day when this woman challenged me and just thought I would back down. From that window on, what I didn't know is she was secretly going behind my back and telling people I was a bad person, telling people, that she doesn't like me or whatever she would do. And I started noticing I just didn't feel good around her. Anytime I was, whether she say, ooh, what size is that dress? There was always some weird comment or disparaging look that she would give me, or she would ignore me when I would enter meetings. And so I just decided, oh, I'll just ignore it. Horrible mistake. I turned a blind eye to bad behavior. And what would happen is she would grow in power and I would sort of shrink back because I thought, I don't want to antagonize her. She's already upset and unhappy, whatever. This went on for months. And during this time, she became more aggressive and more outwardly mean and nasty to me. And I became more quiet, really shrinking away from it, hoping she would just, get sick of trying to attack me and go away. And
Yeah, and
that's
that
like a
happens
little
all the
kid.
time, right? I mean, that's this like mean girl shit. That's like they start growing and there's only so much space in the room. So as they grow, you have no choice but to shrink. And there are these power dynamics there. What are you going to do?
Well, it also reminds me of like little kids with bullies, on the schoolyard. If you let the bully run around and harass everyone, they're not going to go away. They're going to keep at it, right? So
Right.
I finally learned, I had this memory of a huge dog that was chasing me. And I remember a police officer saying to me, the only way to outrun an angry, nasty dog is to run at it, not away from it.
Mm.
And so I remember that situation in my mind. And so basically I made the decision, I'm running at this dog. I'm not running from her anymore. And so I went through this whole process at home where I was working on building my confidence and like really reconnecting with knowing my worth and knowing that I don't need to shrink back just because she doesn't like me. That doesn't have anything to do with me. And so I basically showed up as my most powerful version of myself. And she ignored me and I said, hey, hi, you missed me. I'm over here. And I basically called her out on her BS in front of everyone. And I mean, she fired me, within a month after that. She had become the CEO and she fired me pretty quickly thereafter. But it was like one of those really powerful moments. And then when she actually did fire me, the day she fired me, she tried to force my hand to sign some paperwork that I had nothing to do with in hopes that she could buy my silence. And she held a big check and said, if you sign this paper, you're going to get this check. And I pushed those papers back to her. I refused to sign it. I walked out and then I wrote a book about what happened. And, the rest is history. So I really, in the end, standing up to the bully, standing up to the villain is always the right answer. However, it took me about a year to get there.
Yeah, because looking back in hindsight, it's pretty obvious that she was going to fire you, whether you stood up to her or not, right? Like it's pretty obvious now, but
It
in the
wasn't to
moment,
me. It wasn't to me.
right, but
No.
I mean, now, like 5 years on, you're like, yeah, all the things she was doing, the machinations and the talking behind my back and the, increasing in power, she had it out for you no matter what.
Mhm,
You were a threat to whatever,
mhm,
perceived or real, you were a threat to her. And looking back on
mhm.
it 5 years from now, she was going to have your head on a platter. You just made it more delicious for her because, like if she was going to do it either way. So you might as well have found your power while she was going to do it. And like, you get the last laugh because you got to write a whole book about it, but really hard when you're a
No,
single mom to.
the sad thing is the company was trading at $12, I believe our shares were the day I got fired. And here we are 3 years later and it's at $1. I mean, the company has just had a complete downward spiral in the last 3 years. It's actually kind of sad for me to be removed from it and see what I played a huge role in building over 14 years, how it could be just trashed in 3.
Mm. That is really hard. It's really it's difficult. I do think, there's a difference between building institutions and building cathedrals, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs go into the work wanting to build a cathedral to themselves. They put their name on the company. They put themselves as the hub inside of the wheel, so everything has to go through them, and then they get trapped in the thing that they created. And I think really smart entrepreneurs build institutions that can outlive individuals. And I think when we look at companies that lose really key players and then drop in value, I think, that a lot of that is a cathedral problem sometimes. So
Mhm.
so you're standing there. I want to just talk a little bit more about this moment when you're standing there in the office and she's firing you, probably with a pretty nasty smirk on her face, and she hands you a piece of paper and says, "Heather, you need to sign this. Here's this big fat check. You're a single mom. You don't know what you're going to do. You spent your entire career going here, and you have this do not compete. So you can't do anything else." And you say no. You push the paper back to her and you're like, "I'm not gonna sign it." You leave the check
Uh,
there and you walk out, like, in
mm.
this big, bold, like, movie moment.
Was so badass.
It was so badass, and also, you left the money.
I did, yeah. I'll
That's
never regret
terrifying.
that. I'll never regret that. That was like one of my most badass moments I've ever had in my life. And it was just sort of, it wasn't like I had it all planned out in my mind or anything. It was one of those things. She was smirk and smiling and she was so happy. And I was fighting back tears because I really couldn't believe this was happening. I knew she hated me, but she was also a very smart woman. So I thought, like, listen, I'm so good at my job. I had just been named, like, one all these. There's no way she's gonna fire me, right?
She
And
needs
this
me.
is it's a great example of how you can a successful business people cannot allow emotion in business. There's no space for it, and I'll always remember this. She made an emotional decision that day that cost her business. And for me, in that moment, I was fighting back my emotion to remain in, calm and in control and in a business fashion. And it was very difficult, but I was not about to cry. And I was just trying to breathe and take it all in. And when she just started smiling, 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 so, trying to like suck all the power in the room, in that moment, I don't know what flipped inside me, but it was like the bully situation. I thought in my mind, nope, here's where it changes. And while she was so highly emotional, I just stayed really in my business head. And I just said, you know what? I didn't write either one of these memos. I'm not signing either one of them. And if you have nothing else to say, I'll be leaving. And it was that simple, and I sucked all of the power out of that room. And her face, she almost cried. She never thought I wasn't going to take that check or sign. I was just so sick of being pushed around and treated poorly by that woman. It's like something inside me just snapped. I wasn't even thinking like, and oh my gosh, do I really want this money? It was just, the answer was right there. It was super clear, and I was out of there.
Did you know how much the check was for?
I didn't look.
I love that. I once got offered, about 3 or 4 years into building my last business, I got offered from somebody to buy the business and subsume it. And he basically spent the hour of the meeting telling me all the things that were great about my company and all the things that he was then going to change. And, handed me, like, it was the same thing, piece of paper across the desk, folded envelope, check inside, the number, whatever. And I never opened it. And I have to tell you, there have been times where I've wondered what the check was for, but I've never regretted walking out of that meeting. I looked around and I was like, this is, he's like an old white dude with pictures of, politicians who I don't agree with all over his walls. And he was going to change everything that I'd built. And I just had this like, no, 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 run away. And I feel like if there was a montage of like badass women executive moments, like you walking out of there, me walking out of there, like this would be part of, like, flames behind us, right? Like this would be part of it. And yet it is a terrifying moment. I think there are very few moments in our lives where we hold all the cards. and even fewer ones when we realize it. And there was no way for you to realize in that moment that you held all these cards that were going to become part of what was going to be your future, writing this book and the
Mhm.
speaking and all of, like, if I would have said to you 5 years ago, you're going to be a best-selling author, you're going to be a highly in demand speaker, you're going to be traveling the world, getting on stages, you'd be like, oh no, 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 totally no.
I would never have believed that. Never.
And yet, here you are. And your next book, I know, is going to be about this idea of leapfrogging villains. So is it a little partly inspired by this story as well?
Yeah, one of the things I get asked the most is people, they always want to know the inside scoop on what happened there with that woman. But then the next thing they always ask me, and then what were the next steps you took to get here,
Yes.
right? Because on the outside looking in, it looks like it happened so flawlessly. It didn't, as you know, but to
Yeah.
other people, they think like, oh, it was so easy for you. It was not at all. It
Yeah.
still currently is not easy. Can't wait till I get there. I know one day it will be easier. It's not right now. And so, and I also want people to know the way that I know that, and I've really had this epiphany recently. Gary Vaynerchuk's big into like, you need to enjoy the journey, enjoy the process. That's BS. And I was getting very frustrated with people saying that to me, because I'd be like, oh yeah, I enjoy it. No, it's a struggle. The struggle's freaking real. That's what's real. But what I realized is this: back when I was an account executive, when I started out in my early 20s, that wasn't easy. And it wasn't easy getting promoted to general sales manager. And then it wasn't easy getting local VP and EVP. And then when it got easy, when I got really high up, then it, because I had expertise, I had the network, I had the experience. So it's not about enjoying the journey. It's about knowing that you will get to the time when you can enjoy it, because it is way easier. You will be an expert. You will know which levers to pull and where to go and what to do, and you'll feel way more confident because you'll be so much more competent. So now I just apply that to my life now. I'm only 3 years in. I'm still the rookie, right? I'm still starting out. I don't have the experience, but I know that I'm going to get to a place where I will. And I really try to like continually put myself in that mindset, so I can take a little bit of the pressure off, because it's not easy. And so the book is a lot about not only the negative people that you have to, leapfrog over in order to keep climbing and get higher, but also like, what are some of the pivots, some of the reframes, what are some of the tactics and techniques that anyone can use to get ahead?
Do you think though that you're always a rookie? Like I've been doing the show now for a few months, and I've interviewed, you know, so many different types of people. And one of the things that I've been hearing is sort of a trend that keeps going through this is that they were never cowed by the next big promotion or the next big project. They weren't overwhelmed by it. They were excited by it. Like they sort of brought this rookie mentality that you never quite get to the place. Like, I get what Gary Vaynerchuk is saying about enjoying the journey, but I think I also like, I think part of it is that you're enjoying the knowing that the next destination is going to push you to that next level every time. Like, you're always learning something new, and if you can get excited and embrace the unknown, then just being in that place where you always have that, I could learn more, I could do better, there's always another level, there's always another gear. Having that rookie mentality makes it the mess maybe something that you look forward to, as opposed to something where you just you find, anxiety provoking.
So you bring up the podcast, and for me, that's a good example for this conversation. I've had my podcast now for a little over a year. I am not a rookie anymore. My first 6 months was so scary, and interviewing people was scary, but it's like with anything, when you put X amount of hours into something, you just suddenly, you're not nervous anymore, and you're going to do a great job, right? It was like starting over as a virtual speaker. I didn't even know if I could give a virtual speech. Like, some people can do it, some people can't. I don't know. I was a total rookie. So there are certain elements, I feel like, where, you do, and I'm certainly not an expert in podcasting because I'm only a year in, but I don't feel like a rookie anymore. Like, I really feel different. And I get notes from people, hey, when you first started off, your show was a little bumpy, but it's so much better now. So I know, like, okay, like, there were things I guess I was doing that I was, didn't realize. And now I just feel much more comfortable in the situation. So I'm able to, convey that. So there are parts of it that I feel like, you do get some level of expertise or comfort in. And then there's other parts, of course, where you're constantly, how can I reinvent? How can I make this better? How can I separate myself? Right? That's the constant challenge. Like, why me? And like, why is this unique and different? and constantly trying to reimagine things. I think that's a challenge for everyone in business.
Is there a moment or a feeling or like a physiological reaction when you're like, okay, I got this? Like, is there that moment of like, I've arrived, I feel confident, I know what I'm doing? I mean, I may be
It's
projecting
very
because I'm only a
subtle.
few months into this podcast, but I feel like I'm always like, if I know how to give a speech in front of 500 people, then I get asked to give a speech in front of 5,000 people. I'm a rookie at that. And then once I've done that, I want to give a speech in front of 10,000 people. So I'll be a rookie at that. Like, I don't know that I ever feel like I actually have confidence. I'm always sort of like a couple minutes into it, I'm like, okay, I got this. I'm not going to shit the bed here. It might be okay. But I never quite have that feeling of, I got this. I'm good before I get to that next level. You said it's very subtle.
I mean, I will say with this is pre-COVID, with my speaking engagements, I got to a place that that my last live speech I had to give was for an international finance conference. I am not international. I'm like the most domestic person you're ever going to meet in your life. And I am not a finance person. And I remember thinking to myself, this is going to be a challenge. Wow. What am I going to do about how do I connect these dots? Because it's kind of funny, right? And then I just thought to myself, hey, you did this and it worked. You did this and it worked. The scariest thing I ever did was my TEDx. And I'm like, and that worked. And I just thought, I just take the pressure off of me immediately when I do that. And I feel really confident. And I'm like, it'll come to me, whatever that idea will be. And it ended up, my ex-husband was in the finance business. So I used my intro on the speech I came up with was like a way to relate to them. And I told the story of him and watching him in that business. And anyway, I found a way to connect the dots so that it did work. But I felt really confident that I'd come up with it. And that's when I do come up with things, like the more I'm more creative, the more calm that I am, the more that I can take a step back and breathe, I can find the ways to bring that stuff together. And the podcast is the same way. There's other things that I'm not confident in yet, right? Like I'm still not confident in the virtual speaking thing. It's like some days I turn on the computer and you don't know what you're walking into because everyone has these different virtual setups. And sometimes you can't see anybody. And sometimes it's a platform I've never been on and the platform's having problems. So there's those elements. I don't feel confident there. But I know that if it's like anything with man hours, if I put enough man hours in and I have enough experiences to go back to point to that they worked and that I didn't die, then that will give me confidence moving forward.
If I've had enough experiences and I didn't die,
Yeah,
that'll give me confidence.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah. So I like that. I like I like that idea because I think so many of us, certainly with my executive coaching clients, I know probably with yours as well, a lot of my clients fight really hard to hold on to the insecurities that they bring to the table. They fight really hard to hold on to the definitions or the abuse or the sort of negative people that are all around them. They hold on. They work really hard to hold on to all of those things. And there has to come this moment when you're like, okay, so you've done this and you've done that and you've accomplished this and you've accomplished that. Who are you going to listen to now? Are you going to how hard are you going to fight to hold on to these ideas that aren't real in the face of all this overwhelming evidence? And I'm fascinated that some people are able to look at that list, look at that resume and say, yeah, you know what? I'm actually the shit. That's pretty good. And some people, even with all of that, can't do it. Do you think that there's a differentiator that's there? Do you think that you just have like a gene that some people don't have? What do you think that takes?
Well, everyone's different. And that's something that I want people to know, because people will say to me, like, oh, what's the prescription for confidence? It's not it's not like a Band-Aid, right? And it works for everyone. It stops the bleeding. No, for me, my biggest holdback was that I had a negative person in my space and I was ignoring it. Hands down, I look back, the thing that was crushing my confidence back 3.5 years ago was that I had a villain that needed to be fired. If I did not fire that villain, there's no way that I would have reached the level of confidence in myself that I have today. But some people don't have that person, right? So that's not their biggest problem. Maybe for some people, that villain is the one lying right in here in their head, and they're constantly putting themselves down in their mind because it's something that years ago someone spoke to them that way, they took it on, and they don't even notice it, right? Or for some people, it's maybe that they hate finances, but someone told them to be a CPA and that's their career. And every day they go to work hating their job and pretending to be someone they're actually not, right? So that person has a different challenge than I have. it's really about figuring out, getting real with yourself, hearing yourself, listening to, noticing, how do I feel when I leave this person? How do I feel when I go to work? How do I feel when I'm with my child? What am I not paying attention to? I have a client that I was working with for the past month, and I just always got the sense she wasn't real when she was showing up with me. And I finally I leveled her on the call, because I don't want to even take her money. I said, something's wrong. And I know we're talking through a computer, but I've never had this experience. You're not being real with me. I don't know what it is, but I can't do this anymore because it's very uncomfortable for me. And she told me what she hadn't been telling me. She's been having all these problems at work, but really what it was a problem at home. And when I called her out on it, she dumped it on the plate. And I said to her, listen to me, you just answered your whole own everything you've been talking to me about for a month about work and all the compensate for this one problem you just identified at home. If you don't fix the problem at home, you're not going to fix the problems at work. And the minute you fix the problem at home, you fix your problem at work. You could see it was a through thread. You could see it. And she started crying and she said, I haven't been wanting to deal with it. So again, it just goes back to, we all have our own answers. We just got to start asking ourselves better questions, hold ourselves accountable, and take action to fix it.
Yeah, and sometimes it just needs, if you have the villain, sometimes you need to have like a council of heroes, right? You need to have people that are around you. I think there's that Jim Rohn quote that says you're the average of the 5 people you keep closest to, which I think is really true. But then I heard John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach, said you will never outperform your inner circle, and I thought that was like such a truth bomb for me, because I've always thought if I have great people around me, then I'm going to do great. But then it was like, okay, well, where do I want to be? And what kinds of people do I want to surround myself with? Because if I'm not going to outperform everyone that's in my inner circle, then I better find some pretty good people that are there. And I think a lot of us have this, this negative Nancy or this villain or this person in our lives that we keep because it's almost like a Stockholm syndrome thing. It's this abusive relationship where they're telling us that we're not good enough, but don't worry, I'll still spend time with you, kind of, is sort of the idea. It's like a smack with one hand and a hug with the other. So you almost like I think a lot of us have that one person, but we work really hard to please them. Do we go after this pleasing of them, even though we know we're never going to get it? And yet it's like the thing we want more than anything else. And if we take ourselves out of it, if we were looking at someone else, we'd say, well, why? Why that person? Like, why do you actually care about that individual person? But we get in this trap. How do we get out of that trap? Like, how do you separate yourself from the emotion of it? And like, are there exercises that you bring your clients through to help them think about how to separate themselves and really figure out who they should be listening to, who really is a villain and who really is a hero?
I mean, the most important voice and the only voice that really matters is your own. And the more real you can get with that voice, the louder you can turn up your intuition, the more you're going to make better decisions for yourself. And start with baby steps. I have everyone journal that works with me so they can start noticing their inner voice. A lot of people don't even notice it. They're not, if you've tuned it out for so long, it's hard to hear it. And I remember when it was like that for me in my early 20s. A bar on a date with someone, and if I didn't feel I was getting enough attention, I'd walk up to a stranger and be like, could you believe that this man's not paying attention to me right now? Constantly looking outwardly for validation, constantly looking for encouragement outside of me. Fast forward 20 something years, I would never walk up to someone I don't know to ask if they can encourage me. I do that. I'm my biggest cheerleader. If someone wasn't paying attention to me, I'd be like, well, that's on you, pal. Peace out. I'm out of here. Because my inner voice would say, Heather, you deserve better than that. Let's get it moving. We're at it. We don't want that. But it's all about dialing up that inner voice. And the more you start taking action on it based on what your intuition is telling you, not what others are telling you, the better you start feeling. And start with little small steps. Even for that client that I mentioned had this problem at home, I said, I understand if you can't fire your villain today, but can you go home and have a direct conversation for the first time today? You can do that. So at least voice how you feel. Even just taking that one little step, you'll go to bed and sleep better tonight and say, I'm proud of me. That was something I haven't been doing. I'm acknowledging how I feel. I'm listening to my inner voice and acting on it. When you do that, that inner voice is going to get louder, and it's going to keep getting louder. And then suddenly you can't hide from it anymore. And then suddenly you're pushed to take the action. And then those dominoes just start falling, and it's a lot easier to make decisions. And it's a lot easier to feel good about who you are.
I think that first step, the first time you voice that inner voice, is the hardest. right? Like you say it and you turn around and you're like, oh my God, well, my pants didn't light on fire. Like I didn't die, right? I survived it. And then, yeah, you're like, you're good. Like I think you get that confidence from going out and doing it. And sometimes things do fall apart when you speak your intuition, and it just may be that those aren't your people. Like if you're not the hero of your story, maybe you're just in the wrong story, I think. And so I think we have to find the right story, but that's really hard. And it's really hard when you have this whole lifetime of messages that are telling you like this is the right story and this is the wrong story.
But it does get easier. And that's what I want people to focus on. It does get easier. The more you stop listening to what everyone else is telling you. My family told me not to publish this book. When this
Mm,
book was done 6 weeks before it came out, I gave it to my innermost circle, to my blood relatives, and they said, don't do it. You're going to be sued. You're not going to sell any books. It's not that good. You shouldn't bring up the past. I mean, they gave me every reason that was about them. And I did something very smart. I called my editor, who had written 19 books. I had written zero. This was my first one. I
mm,
didn't know. I didn't have experience. And he said to me, why did you write this book? I said, because I wanted to help one person that was in a situation like I was. He goes, okay, has that changed? I said, no. He said, then why are you calling me? Why are you even considering not publishing this? I said, okay, good point. That was it. So I called someone who's 19, books ahead of me, and realized, hang on, that's about them and my family. And granted, that was sad. I was really sad they weren't supporting me in it. Now they do, of course,
sure.
2 years later, whatever it is now. Now they're like, oh yeah, we love the book. And it's just funny. But had I not listened to myself, had I not said, you know what, I did this for something different. I'm not going to accept their self-limiting beliefs. I'm going to thank them and hand it back to them. And I'm going to keep on moving with my plan. And I needed the help from someone who was light years ahead of me to help push through those dark times. But I'm so glad I did. And every time that you listen to you, and every time that you hand back other self-limiting beliefs, you get stronger and stronger.
It's so hard though, because we have all these people in our lives who love us, and we run into them, at the coffee shop, or, we have family dinner or whatever it is. And we tell them our big, hairy, scary goals, and they go, oh my God, you can't do that. That's so scary. And what they really mean is, oh
Mhm.
my God, I can't do that. I'm too scared. But we
Mm.
hear it and we think that it's real. And we think it's real because either it's coming from a place of love or a place of fear or a place of jealousy. And yet it stops so many of us from doing the thing we want to do, when in fact it's not based on anything other than their own notions of like what it means for themselves. And even if they do love you, it's only based on what they know. I'm so glad that you talked to that editor who was 17 books ahead, because I think we don't do that. I think we listen to the people who love us the most and we go, okay, well, they know me best and they're telling me this. And we don't take, again, it's looking at that whole long track record of like, what are all the things I accomplished? Okay, so what does it mean I can do? And we don't use all of um all of the good stuff that's available to us, all those experts and all the people who walked the path before us. So going out and making those calls, if you don't know, is a really great way to build that confidence and figure out if it's the right thing for you.
Well, it's really important for people to ask this question. Is this person that's giving me advice right now, have they been where I want to go? Had I
Mm,
asked
mm.
myself that question, my mother had never written a book. My sister had never written a book. Why was I taking expertise from people who had never done what I was trying to do? You can't. So I liken that to, if you've ever been in a ditch and had to get out of it, would you like to take advice from someone who watches people fall in ditches and get out? Or would you like to take advice from someone who climbed out of the ditch themselves? Of
Yes.
course, from the person that's climbed out, because they know that if your footing comes off, you're going to slip, and don't go that way because it won't work out. But it's a lot easier to climb up this side. You can't tell that stuff if you haven't been in there. Always ask yourself, has this person done what I'm trying to do? And did they do it successfully? Like, are they ahead of me? Have they been where I'm trying to go? And if they have, then you can say, okay, I'll hear what I'm willing to listen. When I gave my TEDx talk, I had this speaker coach that worked for TED, and she was giving me all of her expertise. And I just didn't like it. I was like, I'm not feeling this. So I called Amy Morin, who has 15 million views of her TEDx talk, because I thought, this lady's been where I'm trying to go. I'm going to listen
Mhm.
to her. And I called her and I said, can you just give me your frank advice on A, B, C, and D? And she did. And I said, okay, I just felt like, you know what? She knows something that I don't know. And so I'm going to take that. And this other lady had never given a TEDx talk. I'm like, I just, it wasn't connecting for me. And I think it's a valid and fair question to ask yourself.
It is a great question, and I wish I'd asked that question before I gave my TED Talk because I can't even watch it anymore. I went on that stage and I talked like Ted. I did a very formal talk like Ted, and now I get on stage
They
and it's
love that.
like,
That's the advice the teachers give. Yes.
yes, and it's terrible, and the woman who gave me advice is very smart and very good and has coached tons of speakers who have gotten their TEDx's to Big TED, and she's brilliant, and yet she couldn't help me be me on stage, and obviously, it was the first big
Mhm.
talk I ever gave, so, like, I didn't have a lot of experience at all,
Mhm.
um, but I can't even look at it now because I tried to be what I was told to be by people who hadn't been on that stage yet, and now I get on stage and I've had so much better advice from people that are like, "Yeah, that terrible cold open you do, I don't really like it." And then you tell the story about you, and then you're LGO, and that's the LGO I love. And can you bring her out sooner? So I got rid of the opening that I was doing, and I now just go out on stage fully me. But it's because I got advice from people who had been on the stages that
Mhm.
I want to be on. And it's that is, I think, it's such an exceptional piece of advice. Is this person who's advising me somebody who has been where I want to be? I think that is absolutely phenomenal advice. And I think a great place to end. So tell the people who are watching this live, we do these interviews live every Tuesday and Friday morning on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, on Twitch. But for people who are listening to this later on a podcast who are not seeing the scroll underneath, tell the fine people where they can find you.
My website is heathermonahan.com. My show is Creating Confidence with Heather Monahan. My book is Confidence Creator, and I'm on all social media at Heather Monahan.
Fantastic. Heather, thank you so much for your time today. I am so excited to go tackle my day. We had this conversation. It was a great start. I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for
I
having
appreciate
me.
you. Thank you.